How's it going, everyone? This is Nick from Reventure Consulting, and I am back here with another Reventure YouTube cast. I have a very exciting episode for you guys today. We're going to talk about a topic that I get a lot of questions on. In fact, this is probably the most common question I get from real estate investors and home buyers from around the country. You guys are all out there looking at new cities, looking at new markets, trying to find places it would be good to invest in real estate. Whether it be buying a home or buying an investment property, you want to find markets that are growing and that are affordable where you can make a good return on your investment. So because of that, you guys ask me, Nick, what are the cities, the towns, the markets that have the most growth potential going forward? Like, what are the diamond in the rough, under the radar cities and markets that no one is really talking about today in 2021, but that by 2031 or 2041 could be huge boomtowns, almost in the way that Austin, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Salt Lake City, Utah are today. Those were cities that 20 or 30 years ago, not a ton of people were talking about. But then, of course, over the last 2 decades, they've been the fastest growing cities in America. And of course, real estate investors in those cities have done very well because of that. So today we're going to take a look at 2 cities and markets that I think have the potential to be those next boom towns, and we're going to look at the data surrounding these markets. Now, before we get into that, make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Please also make sure to like the video and to comment on the video. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you live in some of the towns and cities I'm about to talk about? I want to hear your feedback. And without further ado, let's get into it. So we need to first start by establishing a methodology, a way for evaluating cities and different cities and trying to understand what are the ones based off data that have the best potential to be the next boomtown. And it's super important to use data in this process, right? Because in real estate, everyone thinks their city's the greatest, right? If you go to any realtor in any city, they're going to tell you, oh my God, things are blowing up here. You got to buy now because in the next 10 to 20 years, there's going to be so much growth. Right? You've heard that a million times. So we know that can't be true everywhere, right? There's some cities that are going to grow. There's other cities that aren't. Some cities are going to decline. We need to use data to try to identify the cities that have the best potential of being that next Austin, the next Nashville, the next Salt Lake. What are the cities that have the best potential? And there's really 3 key criteria I am using to evaluate those cities. The first is economic growth. A city needs economic growth to be a good future real estate market. If it doesn't have economic growth, it's really not an area worth investing in. So in terms of economic growth, I'm looking at things like increases in jobs, right? You need to add jobs to the local economy to stimulate real estate demand. If jobs are growing, it's a sign that the economy is growing, and it's a sign that real estate demand is going to increase into the future. Another thing we probably want to look at is wages, right? Jobs aren't the only thing that matter. The type of job matters, right? You can add lots of service-based jobs, lots of construction jobs that are low wage. That's great, but you also want to balance that out with some higher wage, higher education jobs, which really will help push a market over the top and make it a good investment area. Now, the second thing that we care about is affordability, right? There's lots of markets that meet the criteria for economic growth, but they're already expensive. Austin and Salt Lake would be these markets like that. They're already really expensive. If you buy now, you're really getting in too late. So you want a market to have economic growth, but still be affordable. The affordability is key. That gives you the opportunity as a home buyer or real estate investor to get in early, right? To get in before other people have sniffed it out and have figured it out. If you have job growth plus affordability, that's a really good combination and gets you closer to finding those boomtown markets. So the third thing I want to talk about is spark. And spark is a little more subjective. Basically, cities need different sparks to be able to ignite growth into the future, right? And a spark could be a bunch of different things. It could be a big company that's headquartered in the city that really stimulates employment and stimulates inward migration, that invests back into the city. That would be a spark that could help ignite growth into the future. Something like a big healthcare system being in a city could also be a spark, as well as a big university. Those are things that are really solid foundational pieces of a city's economy that can propel growth into the future. So we want markets that have economic growth, affordability, and sparks in the local economy. These are the things that are going to potentially turn your city from a small kind of regional outpost into something that could be a national boomtown. And the first market of the two that we're going to talk about has all of these three things in spades. It has lots of job growth, it's still super affordable, and it has really two big sparks in the local economy that make it exciting for real future growth. This metro area I'm talking about is Fayetteville, Arkansas. So the Fayetteville, Arkansas metro area is located in the northwestern part of Arkansas, kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like if you look at it on a map, it's not going to appear like there's too much around it, but within Fayetteville, it really has all it needs to continue growing. You can see Fayetteville, Arkansas called out here on the map. This is the metro area for Fayetteville in northwest Arkansas. There's not too much directly around it. It's about a 3-hour drive from Oklahoma City. It's about a 4-hour drive from St. Louis, maybe a 3-hour drive to Memphis. So there's not too much directly around Fayetteville, but that's okay because there's more than enough within Fayetteville to sustain the demand. And let me just show you what I'm talking about here. So we have kind of the metro area drawn out. And what I want to point you to is two principal locations. One here is the principal city of Fayetteville in the southern part of the metro. And then I want to point you to Bentonville in the northern part of the metro. Why am I calling these two out? Well, Bentonville, you might know, is the headquarters for Walmart. Walmart employs over 10,000 people in Bentonville. It's been headquartered there ever since it was founded over 50 years ago. And Walmart is really the economic engine of this area. It's growing rapidly, increasing employment, increasing wages significantly in the region up here. So in terms of Fayetteville, most of the wealth concentrated in this area, Bentonville, Cave Springs, Rogers. Springdale is this town that's kind of in between. And then you have the principal city of Fayetteville, which is where the University of Arkansas is. And this is what I mean by sparks. So you have the University of Arkansas down here with 30,000 enrolled students, rapidly growing. And then you have the headquarters of Walmart here, and you go up and down I-49 about 25 minutes away from each other, and you have two sparks both on the southern and northern edge of the metro area. These are sparks that can propel growth into the future in Fayetteville. And when you have a company like Walmart headquartered in your town, it is massive for the local economy. I mean, Walmart's one of the biggest companies in the world, and it's disproportionately propelling job growth and wages in a town like Bentonville. So it's drawing in all of that public investment, both in U.S. equities, foreign equities. A lot of it comes to the benefit of Bentonville itself. So that is huge for the local economy. And when you have such a big company there, there's lots of kind of spillover positive externalities. Walmart invests a lot in the local community, invests in startups, and invests in revitalizing the community. So when you have a big engine like that, it's almost like having, let's say, like the federal government in your town. It's just a huge propulsion engine. But of course, Walmart is a much faster growing entity than a government, so it's better. Now you combine that with something like the University of Arkansas, 20 to 25 miles south, where you have maybe more, liberal attitudes, more hipster, more artistic, and you start to have a good combination between corporate and education. And that type of combination is what made a city like Austin really blow up. It had the University of Texas and it had Dell in the 80s. And it was really the symbiosis of those two which made Austin a tech hub. Who knows exactly what's in store for Fayetteville into the future, but the fact that it has Walmart and the University of Arkansas right there is a huge benefit. Now, those two entities, those two sparks, have really propelled Fayetteville forward thus far. When you look at cities that have the most job growth over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, Fayetteville is very near the top. You're not going to find a market that over the last 20 years has had better job growth than Fayetteville. In fact, Fayetteville's percentage increase in jobs since 2000 is the exact same as Austin's. Right? So Fayetteville is at that Austin level in terms of economic growth already. And that's got to get you really excited as a real estate investor. And you can see what I'm talking about here on this graph. I'm comparing the change in jobs in Fayetteville to some other select southeastern growth markets. And basically you can see that Fayetteville has increased its job count by 67% over the last 20 years. That is tremendous growth. Like I said, you're not going to find many other cities that exceed that growth. If you guys enjoy this content, but you're disappointed that I only post 2 videos a week on YouTube, then you'll definitely want to follow me on Instagram at Reventure_Consulting, at Reventure_Consulting on Instagram. I post content every day. I post a new graph, a new chart, a new map every single day on US real estate and demographics. I also post stories about myself explaining what the data means. So if you want more of this content, if you want to become more educated on real estate, follow me on Instagram at Reventure_Consulting. And you can see on this graph, Nashville, which is one of the top growth cities in the US, has grown its jobs by 40% over the last 20 years. And Fayetteville is at 67%. Right, so Nashville is a good growth city. A place like Durham is also a good growth city at 25%, but Fayetteville is just leaps and bounds above places like Nashville and Durham. And if you look even further down, Atlanta and Birmingham, Fayetteville just laps the field when it comes to job growth. So we've talked about the sparks in the Fayetteville economy. We've talked about the job growth. How about the affordability? So Fayetteville, although it's gotten a little more expensive over the last 5 years, is still extremely affordable compared both to like the US average as well as other growth markets across the country. So the way to think about this is that Fayetteville over the last 5 years is in the 95th percentile for job growth. So it's just really in that upper echelon. Other markets that are in that upper echelon are like Salt Lake City, Austin, Provo, Utah, Boise, Idaho, have similar job growth to Fayetteville. What makes Fayetteville so attractive, though, is that home prices there are about half the levels in those other cities. So the typical home price in Fayetteville in March 2021 is about $220,000 for the typical home price in Fayetteville. Compare that to like $410,000 in Austin, around $450,000 in Salt Lake. So Fayetteville, for all the growth that it's offering, is extremely affordable. So if you're a real estate investor, if you're a home buyer who wants to be on the cutting edge of appreciation and growth, Fayetteville is a city that would deliver that. You can still get in early. It would still be early in Fayetteville to buy, and there's probably going to be good growth into the future. So Fayetteville is one of the 2 cities that I think really offers huge growth potential and could be one of the next boom towns in America. Now, what's the second city? Well, it's not too far away. It is also in the southeast. The second city is Huntsville, Alabama, right? And I think some of you who don't know about Huntsville might be saying, Nick, you're recommending a city in Alabama? Like, why would I want to invest in Alabama? Well, that thought is exactly why you should want to invest in Alabama, because a place like Huntsville gets passed over by institutional investors who see the Alabama and they think, oh, it's like a southern rednecky type place. It's not really a place I want to invest in real estate, so they don't look at it. When in fact, Huntsville is one of the top tech hubs in America. It's in the top 10 in terms of tech and software developer employment of any city in the country, and that's because the city is an aeronautical, space, and engineering hub. Over the last 50 years, NASA has had a huge presence in the city, and that's caused a lot of other huge companies like Lockheed Martin, Amazon's Blue Origin space program is now located in Huntsville, to move in, and is causing massive economic growth. So to get you acquainted with the geography, you can see Huntsville located here, basically in the very northern section of Alabama. And it's kind of in the middle of this kind of southeast triangle of sorts. You have Birmingham, which is about an hour-and-a-half drive south. You have Atlanta, which is a couple hours to the southeast. Nashville, an hour-and-a-half to the north. Chattanooga, maybe an hour drive to the east. So you have actually a lot of other really big, good cities in close proximity to Huntsville. But like Fayetteville, Huntsville is very self-contained. So if we zoom in here, you can see the downtown area is in the southeast part of the metro. And interestingly, Huntsville is not a downtown-centric market. The downtown of Huntsville is actually very underdeveloped compared to a lot of other downtowns. Most of the industry is further west here. If we zoom in, we see the University of Alabama in Huntsville. That's one of the first two sparks. University of Alabama in Huntsville has over 10,000 enrollment. It's a high research university, so it's a really strong university presence. There's also a couple other smaller colleges in Huntsville. So you have that educational presence, which kind of brings more like liberal bohemian ideas, and that's a good thing. But if we go further west, this circle, this is called Cummings Research Park, and this is where all that aeronautical engineering, space, rocket design, and technology, it's all here in Cummings Research Park. It's actually the second largest research park in America, and like I said, NASA, Lockheed Martin, Amazon Blue Origin, there's tons and tons of really legit companies here that are massively adding employment, and they're adding what I talked about earlier, that high wage employment into the local population. What makes Huntsville really, really special are those high wage jobs. So if you look at data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they track the average hourly wage in each metro area. So that's basically saying what's the average hourly earnings of both service and salary workers on average across the local economy. And in Huntsville, it's $33 an hour, which is in the 90th percentile of US metro areas. And it's actually above areas like Denver, Portland, and Austin. Huntsville has a higher hourly wage than Denver, Portland, and Austin. Just think about that for a second, right? That probably is like very shocking to you if you don't know about Huntsville and you're just like, oh, it's in Alabama. Huge wage growth over the last 5 to 10 years. And well, obviously that's good just in and of itself, but it's also really good for the real estate market because in the end, individuals and family wages are one of the most primary determining factors of how much real estate values will go up into the future. So if you look at the relationship between home prices and wages in Huntsville, there's a really, really good thing occurring right now where wages are high, but home prices are still kind of affordable. And that means the market is likely undervalued. High wages, affordable home prices means there's probably room to grow for appreciation in that real estate market. And this graph will show you how special Huntsville is. And let me just explain for a second what we're comparing. On the x-axis, we're comparing value to earnings ratio. So that's taking the typical home price in a market and dividing it by the average annual earnings data reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So the higher the value to earnings ratio is, like if we go to, let's say LA, the value earnings to ratio is 12.6. That means the average annual earnings, it takes almost 13 years of average annual earnings to pay back the typical home price. California, San Diego is 12 to 1. These are kind of the outliers. Most cities are around the 6 to 1 area. And basically, the more left you go, the lower the value to earnings ratio is, the more affordable real estate is to how much money people make in the local economy. Now, the other aspect of this graph is job growth over the last 5 years. So basically, the higher the job growth is, the better. The lower the job growth is, the worse. And I want to start with this lower left-hand quadrant here. This lower left quadrant, which is low value to earnings, low job growth. And basically, that makes sense. If you have low job growth in an economy, not much future growth expectations, it makes sense that real estate would be cheap relative to how much people make. Markets like this include Lafayette, Louisiana, Syracuse, New York, Toledo, Ohio, Scranton, Pennsylvania, Dayton, Ohio. These are kind of Rust Belt markets where there's really not much long-term growth, and as a result, real estate is cheap because investors and people migrating aren't looking to be in these cities. But the next thing I want to point you to is the top left. The top left quadrant here is high job growth, but still low values to earnings, still affordable. And what's this blue dot? You can see it by itself here. That's Huntsville. So Huntsville had 9% job growth over the last 5 years at a 3.8 value to earnings. It's all by itself here because there's really not many other markets that are achieving this combination of high job growth but still affordable prices relative to how much people make. The fact that Huntsville is out here on an island means that it's very special. It's doing something that not many other markets are doing. It's offering high growth but affordable real estate. So if you go into Huntsville right now, if you're a home buyer or investor, expect a typical home price of $222,000, very similar to Fayetteville. $222,000 to be in a city that has a huge research and tech hub, has really strong job growth, and is still fairly affordable. That's a great combination. Huntsville is a market that I would love to invest in right now. All right, now I got to present one caveat here, and that is that both Fayetteville and Huntsville have seen large increases in permitting and construction over the last 5 years. Both markets have seen roughly a doubling in new home and apartment permitting and construction. So when you see a doubling in new permitting and construction, it means that there could be some softness in the market going forward as supply increases significantly in a short amount of time. It means basically that these markets aren't completely undiscovered. There are other people catching on. However, the levels of permitting and construction are not at crazy, ridiculous levels. Like there's certain cities in the US, St. George, Utah would be one, the Villages, Florida would be another, where there's ridiculous amounts of new supply and construction. Fayetteville and Huntsville aren't at that level. So I think it's still probably safe to buy into these cities. And look, you're buying into cities that are still under the radar compared to everywhere else. You have a much better chance, much better opportunity of finding an investment property, finding an affordable house in Fayetteville or Huntsville than you do in markets like Austin, Salt Lake, and Boise. And for those reasons, I think these could be the next boom towns going forward. These are markets that you definitely want to track, you definitely want to follow. By no means buy just any property in these markets. You need to do your own research and due diligence, but this is a great starting off point if someone wants to find markets that are up and coming and that other people haven't quite discovered yet. Until next time, this is Nick from Reventure Consulting signing off.